Project X Zone was created by Banpresto and Monolith Soft. Characters from more than 25 different franchises from Namco, Capcom and Sega are represented, with them all having playable roles. But what this game brings to the table is so much more than just a regular crossover. Instead of being a fighting genre of sorts, it's a turn-based strategy game combined with RPG and action elements. Honestly, there is not too much to say about the story. It feels more like it's there just to facilitate the gameplay, which thankfully is where the game shines. The action all takes place on a grid, very much like Fire Emblem, with both players taking turns to move their respective characters around the field and eventually lock heads in battle. Your characters and support characters are called in to unleash attacks that chip away at the enemy's HP, and timing is the most important aspect of each encounter. Using the right abilities and calling in support at the right moment allows you to gain huge bonuses such as critical hits that deal immense amounts of damage to locking the enemy in place and allowing you to build up your super meter and ultimately unleash some devastating attacks. These special moves light up the screen in style as the frantic and spectacular blending of characters performing absurd attacks is all at once imaginative, gorgeous and incredibly satisfying. With its simple to learn yet complex battle system, superbly written character interactions and a localization that was definitely produced with a lot of love and care, Project X Zone is one of those rare games that go the extra mile and are all the better for it. If you like Namco, Sega or Capcom in any way, this is one game you will not want to miss. Shin Megami Tensei is one of the last great turn-based JRPG franchises that is still producing high-quality titles. The story is mature and dark, and the gameplay is grueling and somewhat unforgiving, but that's where the game's appeal lies. It's not afraid to challenge the player, and quite oftenly it'll put you on your ass if you're not prepared. As with most games in the series, you take on the role of a demon summoner, with the ability to use their powers and also talk others into joining your cause. In order to grow stronger, you will want to fight to gain experience, but there are many ways to do this, other than just mindlessly killing enemies. Side quests are a huge part of the adventure, and not only serve to dish out XP, but actually add to the world itself through meaningful interactions with NPCs that add a real weight to the intriguing world that SMT4 sets up. I won't go too much into the details of the story, as I believe it to be one of the best aspects of the game, and going in blind is the best way to enjoy it. Now, the battle system isn't the only thing you'll find yourself getting stuck into, as once again the concept of fusing your demons together plays a huge role in the game. With the demons you recruit, you are able to level them up and fuse them together to create more powerful and different creatures, and it's here where a lot of the freedom within the game lies. Experimenting with the system will likely eat up more of your playtime than you can imagine, and with over 400 demons and 4 separate endings to see, there's a serious amount of replayability on offer that makes Shin Megami Tensei 4 one of the most engrossing games you'll find on the 3DS. Pushmo is without a doubt one of the most unique and jolliest games you'll find on the 3DS. It sees you taking up the part of Malo, with the main goal of the game being to save a child who's stuck at the top of each stacking puzzle. As you traverse through the game, the puzzles become more and more complicated, with new features such as teleporting points and manholes that serve to spice up the difficulty and often result in a lot of time scratching your head. One of Pushmo's most appealing features is the gameplay's emphasis on trial and error. It allows you to examine each puzzle in its entirety and plan out your strategy beforehand rather than attempting to rush you through stages in an effort to boost your score. And there is no time limit or cost associated with restarting a level, so you may take as much time as you like using the camera to study the details of each puzzle and develop your tactics accordingly. There's even a rewind button, which is an absolute godsend when you accidentally pull or push a platform too far and render the entire stage impassable. There's over 250 different stages to make your way through, and despite the somewhat childish appearance of the game, Pushmo is not afraid to challenge those that play it. The visuals in the game are charming, but like most puzzle games, are not a real benchmark for the system, and what I imagine could be helpful is the way players can view the levels in 3D. This added dimension really does feel like an essential part of the game, and a perfect use of the 3DS's feature set. All in all, this game is nearly a perfect package. Perhaps the platforming aspect could have done with being a bit tighter, and the placement of the various extra elements that go along with each puzzle seems somewhat random at points, but on the whole it's nothing that detracts from what is a really simple yet challenging experience. If you own a 3DS, you owe it to yourself to try this one out. The two title characters in the strangely named Professor Layton vs Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney are allies, not rivals, which is the first thing to grasp. What you've got here is a team-up between two of the most alluring styles from the DS and 3DS, plain and simple. The distinct gameplay styles from the two series are combined together, and this works better than you may think, which is mainly because they have a lot of things in common. It involves going on adventures, finding information, resolving puzzles, and ultimately going to court. Both the Professor Layton games and the Ace Attorney titles involve you moving from one screen to another while searching for hotspots that usually contain items that make the whole process of each case easier, from secret coins to helpful pieces of evidence that each have a part to play. Even though the plot frequently shifts between the numerous characters throughout the game, it is that exploring aspect that really ties the two portions together. Typical of the Layton games are the puzzles. There is a good variety on offer here, ranging from matching and sliding puzzles to more physical ones involving sneaking around and swordplay. What makes the Ace Attorney games what they are, at least partially, are the trials. There, Phoenix must use the gathered evidence to undermine and disprove witness testimonies, and it's a really nice mix of game styles which end up complementing each other perfectly. If you've played just one of the series featured here, now is a great time to be introduced to the other. You will find the transition between the Phoenix court battles and Layton-led investigations to be so natural that you will wonder why it took so long to combine the two in the first place. If you can, grab it and add it to your collection if you see it for a reasonable price. Starting out life way back in the 90s, the Fire Emblem series has been puzzling players since the days of the NES and has gone on to become one of Nintendo's flagship strategy RPGs. Awakening is no exception, and at the time of its release, the seamless blend of new features and the balancing of the old made it one of the best entries the franchise has seen to date. The standard gameplay of Fire Emblem has never been an issue, but they managed to improve it and make it more accessible to newcomers without ruining things for longtime fans. Now, like many SRPGs, all of the action takes place on a grid and sees the player moving their various units around the field and strategically engaging with the enemy when the time is right. At the start of each turn, you'll have to look at the map, form a plan, and then figure out the best way to advance. You'll be able to utilize your surroundings as you move your soldiers around the grid and take advantage of forests and attack the enemy that is passing by from the shadow. There's a great selection of these special places on the map, which can all be used to your advantage, but you also have to take into account that the enemy can do it as well. With so many different types of units and the ability to recruit most of them into your ranks, Fire Emblem Awakening is one of those games you'll find yourself losing a lot of time to, but not even noticing whilst doing so. Now, the top screen is where the action happens visually. All field movement, conversations, cutscenes, and battle scenes take place here. The 3D effect is used pretty nicely. While it is not particularly noticeable in most of the field screens, it looks much better during each duel. Character models themselves also look pretty good, with distinctive looks for all of your own units and well-varied enemy types to boot. This is for sure one of the best looking 3DS games that uses the system to its full capabilities. If you're a fan of Fire Emblem, this one is a must, and if you've never played the series before, it provides one of the best jumping on points to get into it. Rusty's Real Deal Baseball has to be one of the most quirkiest games you'll find on the 3DS. It all revolves around Rusty, a lovable dog, who has opened a store that is not doing all that well. The situation in his home is even worse because it appears that his wife has left him, and Rusty offers the player a free copy of the Bat and Switch game in exchange for watching over one of his kids. From there, you may buy and play games, gaining special items that advance Rusty's story as you go along. Now, the setup sounds completely insane, and I get that, but it possesses a certain amount of charm that simply oozes out of every aspect of the game. At first, each minigame is quite simple, but they all soon expand to include extra challenges that mix up the gameplay. At first, you'll find yourself at the batting nets, practicing your swing, and then in no time you'll be swatting down UFOs with your shots and taking on other objectives that serve to add a bit of variety to just aimlessly swinging your bat. The 10 different minigames offer up their own unique take on the premise, from playing as a pitcher and scouring the skies to catch the ball, to even taking on the role of an umpire and getting to call the shots yourself. While playing through them is a lot of fun. In all honesty, I had more of a blast just talking to Rusty and getting to know his situation and watching the story unfold. The game is hilarious, and this endearing aspect of it soon becomes one of its most prized accomplishments. That feeling of just one more round perfectly sums up Rusty's baseball. That makes it ideal for picking up and playing in small bursts when you're on the go. Overall, Nintendo's take on the free-to-play model was a huge success and didn't feel like a game that was trying to nickel and dime you every chance it got. The perfect blend of story, gameplay, and collectibles made it one of the hardest games to put down, and I can only hope that there's a future for Rusty somewhere on a Nintendo console down the line. The Kirby franchise has always been one of my go-to platformers when I'm looking for something fun to play that's easy to pick up and get into. With the exception of the various spin-offs, it's the type of series that can perform the same thing repeatedly without feeling stale. But Planet Robobot manages to stand out against previous titles by introducing some of the most intriguing mechanics the series had ever seen up until that point. Like other Kirby games, the narrative is brief, but conveys enough intrigue to keep the player going and continue to make their way through a ton of levels, which all present their own challenges to overcome. In true Kirby fashion, you've got your classic abilities such as jumping and consuming anything you can in your path that copies the various attributes of an enemy you may inhale. From taking up the sword to breathing fire, there's plenty of ways to counteract each threat that comes your way. The main feature of the game though comes in the form of the Robobot armor. In addition to dishing out punch attacks, a double jump and a dash, it allows you to smash through obstacles and also copy abilities just like Kirby can on his own. Of course, when in the armor, these skills are amplified and make even the most mundane of encounters all the more enjoyable, thanks to the sheer power that you're given. Some armors are needed in order to solve puzzles, and in some cases required for stage progression, such as a jet, as it turns the armor into a jet plane, turning part of the level into a 2D shooter. These parts of the game are incredibly inventive and help the armor feel like much more than just a simple gimmick. After the somewhat safe Triple Deluxe, Planet Robobot felt like a breath of fresh air, and once again proved that the little pink puff has got life left in him yet. If you've exhausted the usual suspects when it comes to platformers on the 3DS, then Planet Robobot is well worth checking out. Samus Returns is a remake of the classic Game Boy game Metroid 2, and once again sees you taking on the role of Samus Aran as you're sent to a mysterious planet and are tasked with wiping out the Metroids that reside there, a powerful species that if were to get into the wrong hands could spell destruction for the entire galaxy. Like previous entries, at the beginning of the adventure, your only weapon is your trusty blaster and a rather flimsy suit of armor to protect yourself with. As you progress, you'll naturally unlock new abilities and ways to tackle the onslaught of enemies and bosses that range from new weapons and skills such as the morphing ball that offer up new opportunities and ways to advance. Now, platforming is mostly used to traverse the map, with very few instances that require great skill. The combat is where most of the challenge lies. In addition to her guns and bombs, Samus can pull off a fierce uppercut, which will stun enemies when it interrupts their attack. Only certain attacks can be countered though, and these ones are marked with a brief flash of white light, and again the timing right can be tricky, but this mechanic does provide added depth to the combat, even if it does become less useful in regular encounters as your firepower increases. Now, the presentation of the game is where it really succeeds. The majority of the adventure uses a show do not tell method of narrative, which is discreet and allows you to concentrate on the action first and foremost. And the Metroid series contains some deep unspoken knowledge that can be explored here to your heart's content. Of course, atmosphere is a crucial aspect of how Metroid games are presented, and this game is a master at creating it. Each area has its own distinct look and feel that really plays into the overall sense of exploration that the series has always been well known for. With its tight level design with plenty of hidden power-ups and challenging boss fights, Samus Returns is a true must-have for the 3DS, and is definitely worth adding to your collection if you can find it for a decent price. Atlas had become synonymous with the term hidden gem, and it doesn't get any more hidden than Radiant Historia Perfect Chronology. It's one of those rare games that deserves the hype it never received, and although it originally released on the DS, it would later be ported to the 3DS with plenty of new content and features that made it an entirely different beast altogether. Several hundred years prior to the events of the game, a technologically advanced empire ruled most of the kingdom. Now the entire planet is turning into one large desert thanks to their abuse of the resources that it once provided. Stoke, the main protagonist, sets out on a journey to hopefully reverse the cruel fate that has befallen the land, and soon finds himself caught up in a tale of epic proportion. When it comes to gameplay, Radiant Historia is an RPG with a turn-based battle system in place that provides an immense amount of depth and mechanics, which all come together to create one of the most engaging RPGs in recent memory. In order to set itself apart from other turn-based fighting systems, Radiant Historia uses a 3x3 grid for the enemy's placement. Depending on its size, each enemy can fill anywhere from one spot to the full grid, and their damage significantly fluctuates depending on where they are. Managing your own turns and attempting to score combo attacks are the main strategies for defeating these monsters. There's the standard RPG mix of attacks from basic melee, magic, healing and status effects, but the big twist is being able to shove enemies around on the field and take advantage of their positioning in order to score more amounts of damage. It's such a great system, and once you get your head around the various intricacies that make it up, it plays out in a buttery smooth way. Radiant Historia comes easily recommended if you're a lover of old school RPGs. It is charming, has a solid plot, and the combat system is unique, making it one of the best examples of the genre on the 3DS. Kid Icarus Uprising is a very different game compared to those that came before it. It's mainly split up into two separate styles of play, with the first being various air battle sequences that limit the player to where they can shoot and move, and the second being a third-person shooter. The air battles are by far the best part of Uprising, with them lasting about 5 minutes, and each of them are fast-paced, enjoyable, and will likely leave you wanting more. Unfortunately, due to the lack of a second circle pad on the 3DS, the third-person sections have the potential to turn a lot of players away, and this was one of the main issues with the game upon its release. Sure, it's possible to purchase an add-on that gives you exactly what the game needs, but as time goes on, that will more likely become something that's harder to find. It doesn't completely ruin the game, as it's more than possible to enjoy it without the second circle pad, but it just takes a lot of time to get used to. These control issues are Uprising's only flaw in my eyes, as the gameplay is just simply incredible, and the replay value makes it even more enticing. With a solid multiplayer feature, multiple secrets and pathways that will take even the most proficient of players some time to truly master, Uprising is one hell of a package. The game has many different kinds of weapons to find, equip, fuse and sell, and each class of weapon has their own ups and downs, so finding the right one for the situation at hand adds a severe amount of strategy. On the whole, Uprising is a fantastic game that fully exemplifies what should be done when it comes to designing a game. It doesn't cut corners and is chock full of content, so if you didn't get around to it when it first hit the shelves, now is the perfect time to try it out for yourself. Well, that does it for today's video. Keep an eye out for part 2, as that will be coming up soon, so don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to get notified about new videos, and share the show with your friends. You can follow me on all of the socials, which are linked below, to stay up to date, and also join my growing community on Discord to meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters: Rhino, Skill Jim, Shuden, Richard, Amy, Daniel, Paul, Dio, Omar, Strider, Pierre, Carl, Awesome Jacket Dude, Maximus, Scott, Ryan, Alex, GameCube Galaxy, Pierce Salaryman, and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining my Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find all of these links in the description. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I'll catch you next time.